What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. Today we're doing some preparation stuff in regards to the upcoming KIZUNA clash against Blackbeard. Remember that this is considered to be a normal KIZUNA clash, so you don't have to worry about building teams for super bosses or anything like that. However, we do have 3 separate bosses. One boss in particular is going to be a bit of an interesting one for people to get around. I've got 2 different ways that we're going to be getting through it in today's video. For each different boss, I will have 2 teams for you guys. Of course, maybe not everyone is going to be able to build everything, but I really hope that this gives you a couple of ideas as to ways that you could actually tackle each of these bosses, as there are multiple different ways to get through some of the gimmicks that you'll be encountering throughout this event period. Remember that with this KIZUNA clash, you want to play it to super evolve the brand new Rayliegh. Rayliegh is actually a really good unit. We did a video discussing his abilities with the data mine that came out a couple of days ago. Rayliegh is a fantastic Sugafest exclusive character, especially when you can get him to level 150 with his buffs to his captain and his special ability. He becomes a very usable unit in content. Still not very good in Rumble, but it is what it is. I think he's going to be a very, very fun character to use. So without further ado, let's get into it. So starting things off, let's have a look at the Sai boss, which is the first boss that we're going to be encountering in this KIZUNA clash. So characters that are Fighter, Cerebral, and Powerhouse receive cooldown, so you want to use those types of units or characters that are on the boosted list itself. Battle 2, we're dealing with Chain Attack down for 5 turns, so that Chain Attack down will follow us into the final stage. So you want to try and find ways to enhance your chain multiplier with chain boundaries or chain additions. Those are the best ways to get around that. There's also Resilience and 1 stack of Hunger on stage 2. The team that you're looking at right now, Rayliegh does have Hunger removal, but they're relatively replaceable. There is Resilience, and the way that we're getting around that is with this Big Mom special. This Big Mom does have end of turn damage, so that's really good. Queen on this team, we are using him for the last stage, but here's another character that you may want to think about using, because his special ability does also do end of turn damage upon launch, so that is something that you can consider. When you look at the boss stage though, this is the gimmicks on the screen that you're seeing at level 31 and above. So, the first 30 levels of the KIZUNA will be a little bit easier. I don't know exactly which gimmicks. You can actually go over to the quest guide, and it actually does break down all of the information for you in terms of what occurs between 1 and 30, and then what occurs above level 31. But as for deeper on in this KIZUNA, we have to deal with Recovery Bind. We have normal attacks only. There's a 50% health cut, and that partners really annoyingly well with the pain debuff that's included here, where you're dealt 30,000 damage every time you activate a special, and that in tandem with a 50% health cut is extremely annoying. There is 6 turns of significant defense up, and there is a barrier for 2 turns where you have to use tandem slots. Now this is why I suggested Queen is a decent unit, because Queen, with his special, removes the defense up and gives you a full board of tandem slots, so that's fantastic. Rayliegh, as I said, he's here for Hunger, but he gives us an orb boost. Now, the reason why I opted to use Shanks as the captain here is because we can use Shanks' special on stage 2, and with his captain ability upgrade, it says that anytime we launch an attack boost, base attack, or a chain addition, he extends it by 1 turn, and then Shanks makes it 2 turns on special launch. Captain ability will be extending that to 3 turns, so the attack boost, base attack, and chain addition are carried from stage 2 into stage 3, because remember, you don't actually want to use too many specials on that stage 3 because of the pain debuff. We have Shirahoshi Mansheri, who can actually remove the pain debuff completely for us, which is great, and then we can just kind of go and kill the boss, and ensuring that you use Queen's special last so that you have the tandem slots to break the barrier is going to be important. So yeah, it honestly doesn't seem like too tricky of a boss. This is definitely, in my opinion, the easiest of the bosses. And of course, you want to be predominantly building around the int typing, because Blackbeard being a Sai boss. So this is just one specific team variation that we have against this fight. So moving on to another variation that I have, this one is using the 6-star Legend Uta as the captain, and we're building like a Cerebral focused team, as Cerebrals receive cooldown here. And the cool thing is that with double Uta, we can use both Uta specials on stage 2 to get a full board of slots, and that's locked as well. We get the attack and orb boost for multiple turns, but when you activate 2 Uta specials, so you have like the turn progress activated effect and then you launch the second one, it'll actually give you a significant chain boost for 3 turns. I don't remember the exact value. Yeah, down the bottom there, plus 1.4 for 3 turns. So that's dope. So having that chain boost for multiple turns, getting around that chain attack down is important. With this team, we have Boa Hancock to trigger the removal of the enemy's resilience. The chopper on this team is Limit Break expanded. This rare recruit one, he does have hunger upon Limit Break expansion. The good thing about the hunger, at least, is that it's only 1 stack of hunger, so it's actually not that bad at all to get around. As long as the character has the ability to get it, or you can generate 1 recovery slot, you'll be able to get around it. Now, the pain debuff that does occur is very annoying, so with this team, we only really need to use 2 specials on the final stage. On the final stage, we use the Jinbei special, which gets around the defense up. With his crewmate ability, we're able to remove the rest of that defense up, and then the Robin and Koala does remove the barrier, so you don't have to worry about tandem slots. And then we have the support of the Eneru, which gives a color affinity boost to Cerebral. So just a couple of different ideas. You can either remove the pain debuff altogether with Shirahoshi Mancherry. You could have a bunch of buffs on stage 2 that you carry into the last stage, and we've given a couple of different ideas as to characters you can use to get around some of the gimmicks. So hopefully this helps you against the Psi variation. So moving on to the Int variation this time around, characters that are Strength, Psi, and Int all receive cooldown, but because it's an Int boss, predominantly want to be building that mono Psi team. So with this team here, the idea is to use 6-star plus Gear 5 Luffy Captain with a friend Captain 6-star Luffy, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you have the hybrid setup between 2 Gear 5 Captains, as you have the 6-star version that can resist Bind, you have the 6-star plus which can resist Despair. So those 2 gimmicks that you'll be seeing on Battle 2 and Battle 3, you can just avoid them altogether, which makes things a lot easier. Now on this team as well, we have the Frankie. This Frankie is actually ridiculously good in this fight. He is free to play as well, which makes things even easier. But Frankie's special ability removes the defense up on stage 2, and he gives us a chain lock for 2 turns. This is big because when we kill stage 2 and we move into the final stage, the enemy gives us a really bad 1.1 chain lock, and because we will have a chain lock still active due to the preemptive attack and the fact that it was a 2-turn buff, we don't even get that given to us at all, which is really, really nice. And there is a chain attack down that you will have to worry about. The chain attack down is a 3.75 or below, so that's really, really nasty. But we do have Wano Law, and when we activate his special, the enemy will activate the interrupt. It will remove the beneficial effects, but it won't actually remove the chain boundary, because chain locks and chain boundaries are actually considered debuffs. They're not actually considered buffs on your crew. So that won't get removed, so that's not a problem at all. So with Chain Boundary from Law, Chain Addition from Yamato, and the fact that the enemy is allowed to be inflicted with increased damage taken, you'll have a lot of damage just with that alone. We also have Shanks, which can give us 2 turns of an orb boost. You don't really need that Shanks, you can replace it with any other character that gives you 2 turns of orb boosts, so that's relatively replaceable. And then Gear 5 for massive attack boost, and then the 6-star Gear 5 Luffy, you could use his special on stage 2, so that's really not that bad either. You could as well use the EX Super of 6-star Luffy to make your normal attacks go through defensive effects with the barrier, so because there is a barrier on stage 2. However, there is one key thing, is the fact that there is a special use limit where you can only use 2 specials for 3 turns. That is one reason why we opted to use Shanks on this team, because he's one of the only Psi characters in the game that actually have special use limits, so that's kind of annoying. But there's a couple of other units you could use, like V2 Odin and stuff like that, or alternatively you could just use a strength or an int character that has that, so that it enables you to use more than 2 specials on stage 3. And then having a look at this one here for the second team variation, as you see, the team is incomplete. There's 2 free spots on the crew, and it's just because you literally do not need them, which is wild to see. But the way that this team works is we'd be using 2 Stampede Luffy captains. With that, we allow us to remove Despair, so we don't have to worry about that on stage 3. And the way that it works is on stage 2, we have the Skull and Mihal character. This character removes Bind, removes defense up, and makes perfects easier to hit. So he literally counters everything on stage 2, which is wild. And of course, we'd use the friend Captain Luffy to kill that stage very easily. We'd also have the Whitebeard special. Whitebeard gives us Chain Boundary for 3 turns, so we don't have to worry about the chain debuffs that occur on stage 3, and then of course when we reach the final stage, like special use limit, yes, that is a problem, but we actually don't really need to use that many specials at all. Despair is removed, Chainlock is removed, Intimidate doesn't matter because we would use our own Stampede Luffy this time around to get the 2 turns of attack and orb boost, base attack boost, all of that good stuff. And then the chain attack down, well, we have a significant chain boundary from Whitebeard himself. We have the Marco as well, which can give us a chain boost. So chain is not an issue at all. So we just have to use Luffy's special and that's it. Now you could put like Yamato on the crew to inflict increased damage taken, give you a chain boost that way, and then you don't need the Marco support, so that is one thing. There's just a lot of freedom with this team that you really have access to. Another thing I forgot to mention is that Skull and Mahal also give color affinity for 3 turns. So, you know, Luffy giving attack and orb boost, and then Skull and Mahal give a color affinity boost. Like, this team just is really good, and it's very easy to build. Of course, Whitebeard can be replaced with any other character that's a 3-turn chain boundary character. That will also work. There's just lots of options when you use Stampede Luffy. So, this is a team that I would suggest if you have the available characters. Easy to build, it does a lot of damage. And now we get to the very, very strange boss, which is this strength variation up against Blackbeard. So with this fight, Slasher, Free Spirit, and Driven receiving that cooldown. Battle 2, there's going to be a 51% health cut, and the enemy does have 5 turns of threshold and damage reduction. So the way that this team is going to work is we have Bobbin to remove those 2 defensive effects. We also have Jinbei support to lock slots on our crew because we have Enmazora as our captain. We want to ensure that we are consuming 10 Wano slots before we reach the final stage. It actually does mention in the guide, when you go over to it, that there are 6 enemies on Battle 1 and there are 5 enemies on Battle 2. So they are building this content with Enmazora in mind. So for those reasons, I think he's a pretty solid option in this content. Even if you don't have your own Enmazora, you could potentially still use just a friend captain, and as long as you have the Hiyori as your crewmate, that's going to help you along the way, because you kind of need her to generate the full board of Wano at the start of the quest. Ideally, we would use Hiyori special on stage 1, so that we can keep those Wano slots for, you know, that entire stage. Depending on the color of the enemy, you could actually get away with not using the special of Hiyori there. It is dependent on the enemy's type and all that, because of the way that Enmazora works in his enhanced captain ability. But as I said, using Bobbin on stage 2 to remove those defensive effects, locking the slots of our Free Spirit characters so we can keep those Wano slots for as long as possible. And then because we'd run double Zoro, you could just use one of the Zoro specials. That's not a big deal. But anyways, as for boss level 31 and above, the HP bar for Blackbeard will actually change depending on how much HP he has. So for the first 20% it's strength, the next 20% is dex, the next 20% is quick, and then for the last 2 segments of 20%, it does go dex strength. So a little bit of a palindrome there for his HP bar. Very, very weird. But basically, utilizing characters that are super effective against all types, that's going to be ideal. And luckily, Enmazora is capable of doing that. So the enemy is actually immune to a lot of different debuffs. He's immune to delay, poison, venom, toxic, defense down, but you are allowed to inflict him with the weakened status and increased damage taken. So if you have abilities to do that, that is an option. He does also make perfects a little bit more difficult to hit. He gives you a full board of bomb slots at the start of that turn, locks those slots as well, gives you increased damage taken, and the kicker is the damage limit. So he only allows you to do 50% of his HP for 2 turns. And this is where Enmazora is very good, because if you can get that fully enhanced captain ability, that is going to give you the capabilities to completely ignore that damage limiter effect that is actually inflicted on the enemy. So it means that even though normally you would have to take 2 turns to kill him, you do 50% during that first hit. The second turn, you do the last 50%. With Enmazora, you can double that, which means you're allowed to do 100% of the enemy's HP. That's the ideal way to get through this content. Ideally, you know, you have Zoro, you're super effective, you have the ability to basically ignore the damage limit altogether, and that's going to be really, really good to get through it. There is Special Bind as well, which is why I have Rayliegh Gaban on this team, but any character that gets around the Special Bind is good. I did suggest to put this character though, because he does also give you an orb boost, and then we also have the V2 Odin because he's a color affinity booster. Like it's just kind of okay, but you do see that if you actually take multiple turns, after the first turn he does inflict you with a couple of bad debuffs, but with this team you're killing turn 1 anyway, so that's not really that big of a deal. So that's the Enma Zora team. I think this team's going to be relatively solid. I think Zora is probably the best option for this, but we'll wait and see how people are able to build a little bit different teams against this content. Alright, so talking about the final team that I have for you guys in this video today, up against this really quirky strength Blackbeard boss. This team would be using 6-star Luffy and 6-star plus Luffy, Gear 5 Luffy that is, together. And the way that this team works is that we are going to be utilizing Gear 5, the 6-star Gear 5 Luffy's ability to bypass defensive effects with normal attacks with his EX Super Special, which is going to be really, really nice for the crew. And when we reach the final stage, we get inflicted with that Special Bind, obviously, which is a bit of a problem. So we have the Marco to deal with that, and he also gives a color affinity boost, so that's really strong. But remember that Marco only gives a boost to certain colors, like Cyan or whatever, but if we have one of every color on the team, Luffy makes this actually activate for all characters. So what we would be doing is we have the switchability of Yamato and Ace to switch into the Strength Yamato, inflicting the enemy with the Ignited status, also getting Chain Boundary for 2 turns, which is great. And then we would have the Zoro and Sanji switching into Sanji, which means we would now have one of every color on the crew. We get all of the attack and orb boost and stuff like that. And then Marco's effect will then be for all characters, getting huge color affinity boost, removing Special Bind. It's going to be really useful. And then, of course, we'd activate all of our specials, would have attack boost, orb boost, color affinity boost, boundary, conditional boost. And then the whole reason why I added the lore on this team, this free-to-play treasure map lore says that if we have a slasher or a cerebral captain, he extends the duration of attack and orb boosts by 1 or 2 turns. And when Zoro and Sanji use their special, everyone is considered slasher free spirit, so this works really well as it enables us to extend the duration of that attack and orb boost, which means that we can have it for multiple turns. So turn 1 we can do a lot of damage, especially because remember Gear 5 will be super effective against all types. And then on the secondary turn we can just go ahead and use that Rush Sugo special, and then we just do a lot of damage and win. So that's the whole theory with this team, is that it does take 2 turns, but with all of the damage you have, it's not really going to be a problem at all. One thing I am a little concerned about is that in deeper levels of KIZUNA, the Blackbeard might do a lot of damage back to you, but I'm not 100% certain how bad that will be, but we'll see. Another thing though is that at least you are inflicting the enemy with the Ignited status. So on the end of the first turn, you actually do quite a lot of damage because of that Ignite. So that's cool. You get a little bit of chip damage, which is good. But I think overall, this is just another way that you can get around it. You can either take the 2 turns with a really strong team that's still super effective against all types, or you could go the other route with Enma Zora, which is probably just the easier way to get through it. So that is going to wrap it up from me. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content that I post on my channel, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.